been quite our honor to be a part of this congregation the last year. I want to open that up. Give yourselves a hand. When we started looking for where we were going to put our roots down at the church, we said we needed somewhere where we can be a little weird, because we are, okay? But we also needed somewhere that was truly going to be devoted to each other and bear one another's burdens. We needed somewhere that wasn't just kind, but would actually pray for you. That wouldn't actually just say, how's things going, but would check in. We needed somewhere that I could trust the people around me with the life of my kids. To make sure that if they were ever confused, the truth would be spoken to them if I wasn't in the room. And I want to thank you for being that church. We are in a dark time right now. Oh gosh, I wasn't going to cry. I don't mean to start off so stark. I don't know. I got to be careful with my words today because the message that I believe God has asked of me, and Pastor, thanks for asking me to do this. The message that I feel the word put on my heart, I actually believe has been tried to be ensnared and trapped by the enemy multiple times. From the idolatry of escapism, where I was escaped into my favorite fiction tale, and maybe I'll relate the sermon to that. No, get that out of here, right? To the idolatry of self, where I said, I'm not worthy, Lord. It's been 7 years. I'm a sinner. I know the darkness of my heart. I know what I really think and care about. I should not be preaching. I wonder if Peter felt the same. I wonder if we all feel the same sometimes. So I want to be careful because the other thing that's happened is with everything going on in our world today, it would be too easy for me to get up here and say, this party is evil and this party is imperfect and we need to vote for the right party, right? I don't want to make it about that. However, I do need to say something that's tremendously concerning. That at a rally for one party, someone proclaims Jesus is Lord. I don't know if you've heard this or seen this. And she, whatever party she belongs to, says you are at the wrong rally. Thank you. Growing up, I got confused, much like our youth do today. I got confused that you had to separate church from politics. Church and state don't mix. And that was a lie that was given and sold to the church at large to keep us complacent and compliant, to keep us docile and neutered. And you wonder why people have a hard time coming to church. I spoke with one of my coworkers today. I no longer am in full-time ministry. I'm in full-time volunteer ministry. And where I work now is in restaurant technology. So some of your favorite restaurants, Arby's, Mod Pizza, Five Guys Burgers and Fries, you name it, I'm building the software with my developers for them. I love it because I love food. Let's go. But in the last 4 years working there, I've often asked, Lord, what are you doing with me? Like, I went to school to get a theology degree. I know nothing about APIs and SDKs and the way that C++ is different from React and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And yet somehow the Lord's wisdom shines through me and continues to make a way for me in this world that I had no business being a part of. And I happened to be on a trip in Chicago when I believe this word started to really settle in my heart. I was on a trip in Chicago with my teams, and we were out having pizza, deep dish, not that good. Sorry, just going to say it. Deep dish isn't that good. Okay, it's lasagna at best. And even lasagna's better. But not here to preach again. I don't want it to get trapped in my opinions. But we were surrounded, there was 3 Christians, and you can tell by the countenance, and one person who wasn't sure, agnostic. There's something that, I don't know. We're all just hobnobbing, talking about work and what we think about the organizational leadership and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, one of my good friends who lives in California, we both meet in Chicago, he just goes, I feel like I'm supposed to ask you if you know God, to the one that obviously didn't. Like, you know, when you're around Christians, like, I didn't know that they were Christians, but I'm like, they're probably Christians, you know, like, countenance matters. And it was so awkward. It was the most awkward thing in the world. And then I realized, why is this awkward? Is this not what we're called to? Praise be to the Lord that he obeyed. And so he opened up the question. He said no. We found out where he stood. And then we enjoyed, kind of, our deep dish. He's a good brother of the Lord. The next night we were having Korean tacos. Again, I love food. We were having Korean tacos, and we were going to go bike down the Lake Michigan shore. It was a really cool just moment to get away from work. And it opens up again, and he says, I mean, I just don't like the church. I have nothing against God, and I have nothing against Jesus, but I don't like the church. They're full of people that they don't actually say what they do. They don't actually preach what they actually do. And, you know, he kind of goes into that argument. And he looks at the three of us, and he says, even the three of you, do you agree with each other? And we looked at each other. No. Like, I can tell you, we have some differences. And then right there, the Holy Spirit drew all three of us together in complete unity and said, we do agree on one thing, that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. That none can come to the Father, none can be saved except for through him. That's the one thing we agree with. Man, I'm praying still that those seeds, because it didn't go much further than that, and the enemy wanted us to get trapped amongst us Christians about what differences we had. So we had to shut that down really quick. But I hope those seeds sprout. But going back to my original statement that the church is neutered and complacent, I'm glad to say I don't feel that this place is. I'm glad to say that I see a ground swelling happening. I don't know if you feel it and see it, of Christians starting to rise up. Go to the Capitol and pray fervently. Who protest. I was talking to a good friend of mine, and he said, we forget that Protestant comes from the word protest. So if we're really Protestants, we cannot be complacent. So all this has been swirling around in my heart, in my mind, my own sin, my own complacency. How really I can't sit there and point a finger at the church without pointing a finger at me. And if you don't know the Lord here, I hope you hear that the struggle is real. But I hope you hear the Lord today when he's speaking, because you'll see why maybe there's been times where you've been turned off by the church. I think there's three things in the Bible that if we were to hold fervently to, we would see this groundswell really, really take off into a Protestant movement. There are three patterns that God laid down for us in Exodus 25. Now, I want to thank Pastor Allen for the other day when he went through, a couple weeks back, when he went through the two different parties' platforms. I think that was powerful for us to go through together as a community. And then Greg shared the word last week, a powerful word on being in prayer and being in God's presence and how we can hear his voice. These things need to understood. We need to understand our world, and we need to stay in the presence of God. So I want to build up to this sermon saying that those things very much matter. But we're going to focus in today on three artifacts found in the Ark of the Covenant, the Mosaic Ark of the Covenant in Exodus 25. And what I love about this is that even though we're going to focus on the things, I love what God says in Exodus 25, verse 8. You're going to make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell among them. And this is after he says, do not change anything of the pattern, and also make sure that you use everything you were given. And if you don't know, they were given things from Egypt. When they left Egypt, they just asked, hey, can we have some gold and like various goods? And the Egyptians were like, you can have whatever you want, get out. Like, go. And the Bible actually records that it literally says, and so effectively they plundered Egypt. And I love that they say, and they plundered Egypt, because that's a war term. It's a war term. They plundered Egypt. So then we get to the ark, and it's this beautiful passage about how God wants to dwell with us. And you'll have to forgive me because I do believe we should sit in the presence of the Lord and dwell with God, and his presence should permeate everything we do. But today's sermon is about the importance of God's footstool and his throne and how it applies to our lives today. I used to teach a class called Worship in the Bible. It was a college-level class, and the bulk of this class focuses on the Mosaic tabernacle and how it applies to our lives today and how we are to then live. And I believe in the dark world that we're in, that's the question I keep wrestling with. How do I live? Like, not how should the church live? How do I live? How do I do this? How do I navigate open lies being shoved down our throats? How do I navigate confusion? And how do I do that feeling tired and weary? I don't know about you. I'm weary. I'm tired a lot. Now, some of that's because I got 3 kids. Garcia, don't even talk to me, and Balooz. I know you got more, okay? It's not a competition. The Lord gives each energy levels to their own, okay? But here's the thing. I am tired and weary. And it could be because there might be strategies in place to make us tired and weary so we don't feel like fighting, so we don't feel like protesting. That's been talked of before, and it's not going to be talked of now, but I keep asking myself, how am I supposed to live? And this idea of the Mosaic Ark of the Covenant comes to mind. In Hebrews 9, whoever the author of Hebrews is, lists out that in the Ark of the Covenant there are 3 artifacts, and I want to focus on these today, and I want to relate to us why they are still important today, because God said, do not change this pattern, and if we go through the Bible, we see this pattern repeated over and over and over and over again. Even so much that the temptations of Jesus in the wilderness actually stem out of these 3 artifacts. And I believe also the temptations of Jesus in the wilderness are in our algorithm feeds today. And the question is, do we quickly order our bread so we don't get hungry? Do we try to become influencers so we have power? I'm being very, very, surface level with this. We could go a lot deeper. But are we going to bow to the things that Satan has for us in this world, the confusion, the death? Or are we going to choose life, God's word, and God's provision? And I'm going to share some weakness in my tech job. I've been scared to speak out, scared to wear my really cool hat that says, Make America Pray Again. Because I know I can walk down the street in Chicago and my coworker goes, Trump Tower. Oh, yeah, it is the Trump Tower. What? And it's not even about Trump. Right? It's not about Trump. My hat's not about Trump. It's about praying. But there's a weakness in me. Claire's called it out a few times. Why don't you ever wear that hat? I don't want to be divisive. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to protest. So there's definitely a weakness in me that I've had to preach to myself. Because what ends up happening is that when I look at my job, I'm afraid that somebody would then come and attack me for my beliefs, and I would lose my provision for my family, forgetting that the Lord is my provision, that he gives us this day my daily bread. And so here I am at the idolatry of man's provision, not speaking up, not protesting, potentially not living up to my calling, and being complacent. Not wanting to be, but being. So I want to go over the 3 articles really quick. We'll do a little teaching lesson, and then we'll relate the 3. So in the Ark of the Covenant, this Ark was a box. Most of you know this, so I'm just going to run through it. If you don't know this, really cool. Check it out. I'd say Google it, maybe not, find a trusted source, but so don't chat GPT it, although it's interesting, chat GPT has been getting better and better at like spiritual things, and even going, I would actually maybe equate that there is a creator, so it's like, maybe the rocks will cry out, you know, maybe, I don't know, just a thought there. But I will say, find a trusted source. The tabernacle was a box, and it was made of acacia wood, powerful. Why is that powerful? It's made out of earth. I'll talk about that in a second. And then it's overlaid by gold that they got from Egyptians. Now, if you don't know, in the ancient tradition of the footstool of the king at his throne, a lot of times they would have pictures of their enemies on the footstool. And they would put their foot on it as if to say, I have dominion on them, and also victory. The whole box is made out of Egypt's gold. I don't know anything that says more than that, right? That's tight. Like, I love God. It's like he just flexes that much on him. But, so inside the box, there's 3 artifacts. The first one was to have a golden pot of manna. Manna is what they received every day wandering in the wilderness, which is what we are doing today, friends. This world is not our promised land. I want to buy a farm. I do, if anyone knows of a farm that's for sale. I do want to buy a farm, and I want to make it my sort of promised land. It is not my promised land. And I don't know about you, but I get caught up in the life that I want to live here. And in 2020, I had to get really real with myself and say, do I care more about here than there? I remember there was a prophet that got really big at the time saying, Jesus is coming. And to be honest, being the intellectual from Seattle, I definitely shirked it a little bit, okay? Shirked it off. It got a lot harder to shirk off when you realize, like, the stars were proclaiming the gospel, the Virgo constellation and the king planet came out of Virgo. It was in Virgo for 9 months, and then it came out. It's like, whoa, Freedom, you're getting weird. It's in the Bible. And so there's a part of me that's like, that's happening, and this whole pandemic thing seems weird, and I don't know. So I had to get to my point of, I wanted to take my sons to Disneyland so bad. Disneyland! And I was like, God, don't come yet. And therein showed the problem. Therein shows where the complacency starts. I was complacent. I cared more about Thunder Mountain than the thunder that was going to be rolling on the mountains. I got to take my boys to Disneyland, so the Lord heard my prayers. Thank you, God. Now just fix Disney. But let's get them saved. One day at a time. Yes, let's go. But I had to ask myself, do I grieve over this world too much? Is the provision that God provides for me being spent on the wrong things? Filling my belly, but not filling my soul or anyone else's around me? Filling my kids' bellies, this is the worst scary thing, but not their souls. Is it okay that I get this real and kind of talk about this weakness today? I don't know if you've ever felt this way. So there's this golden pot and manna inside the Ark of the Covenant. And God told Moses, gather a daily portion, because they got it every day and it would go bad every other day, like tomorrow. And put it in there so that the future generations, everyone say future generations, church, will know how they were sustained for so long. I feel like maybe they're talking to us today. Jesus later comes on the scene and he says, I'm the true bread of heaven. So that's how he fulfills that. But he fulfills it even better because he provides the pattern that we're not to, what happens? He's the true bread of heaven, but Satan comes and says, aren't you hungry? Don't you want to turn that stone into bread? And Jesus says, no, God is my provision. I only live on his word alone, which is powerful because the next thing that's in there is the tablets of stone, God's word, the law. I think sometimes when we get focused on what we need today, the daily, we can sometimes forget about the tablets of stone. Or maybe maybe we hold it loosely. I would say, for me, I never let go of these three things. I just kind of held on to them loosely. But in this dark age, we need to hold on to them tightly. So the law represents the way we need to live before God, how to treat God and each other. But I think what's interesting is that the separation of church and state and the way that they treat God's law in our nation and in our world obviously is combative. Like, you are at war whether you like it or not. You can sit there and watch it pass by you. You are at war. We are at war. They hate God's law. They hate God's word. And the question is, are we going to stand for that? Are we going to be complicit? Because to be complacent is to be complicit. For the church to do nothing is for the church to become the state's church. It's the church that the state wills and wants. When we talk about the beginning of Protestantism, there was no separation of church and state. The church was corrupt with the state. It was not good. We stepped out and said, this ain't right. But the complicity and the compliancy to our current state also makes us corrupt. We have pastors today, and Pastor, I know you know this better than I do even. First of all, 33% of pastors quit, I believe. Is that the statistic, I think? 33% of pastors quit during COVID. Probably faithful men who were tired and weary, so I don't want to say anything bad against them. Or we're old and retiring, right? That's the other thing. But then you have, what you have left is the scary thing. You have the enemy taking over churches. You have faithful men getting deceived by the enemy. So we're at war, and it's all against the word of God. And for us to just loosely hold on to these tablets in our hearts makes us complicit and compliant, makes us the state's church. And I today felt an unction to say that we have to protest. And I'm so good, like I said at the beginning, I'm so glad to be a part of this church. We picked this church not knowing what was going to happen. God led us here. In fact, I was taking my mom to the airport on one of her last times visiting, and I was late. And Claire was like, the worship's fire. You got to come quick. So I came in my jammies and, just kind of like some shorts, and you don't need to know what I was wearing. Anyway, so, and Pastor at the end, he gave a benediction for us to grab something out of our pocket. I remember the day, it was September 25th. Grab something out of our pocket and lay it down before the Lord. And I was struggling with my provision. What nobody but my family really knows is that whole year I was denied a merit increase at work, and I worked really, really hard, so there was no reason to deny it. And I was angry. I was angry for months, to the point where I'm like, I'm going to quit. I'm going to do something else. And God in worship every Sunday would be like, shh, like, hush, just chill, just wait, just tarry a little longer. Okay. So then finally that happened. I'd lay it down, and I just said to the Lord, not that I wanted anything to change, not that I wanted more money. I just said, I don't want to be angry anymore. And it broke for me. The next day I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do my good job before the Lord. Like the scripture says. That week, the man who denied my merit increase got laid off. Found out that he got $70,000 spent in travel for the year. It was just flippantly running the card. And I don't mean to like, he's a bad guy. Other than to say it felt very like, what's that book? Esther? Mordecai, right? It's like, I'm going to build these gallows for you, Mordecai. Nope. Anyways, for me, that was like, oh, right, the Lord is working on my behalf, and I don't need to struggle so hard for my provision. He says that I do not need to worry for what I eat, drink, or wear, but just to trust in him. In fact, when you go back to the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount, it all relates back to the Ark of the Covenant. Even the Our Father, hallowed be thy name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us. That's the atonement on the seat. As we forgive others. so powerful when we look at this pattern. Let's continue looking at the pattern, though. And I promise I won't go over, I think. So I'm just kidding. So inside we have the jar of manna, which is God's provision. We have the tablets of stone, which is law and how we're supposed to act and live. If you ask yourself as a Christian, how are we supposed to act and live? Are you lining up to the law? Not that we live under the law, because lucky for us, the law has been sprinkled with Christ's blood. And we break it every day, probably. But when I break it, do I come back to it? Do I still align myself to it and say, you're right? Or do I get confused? Because I'm a sinner, maybe these other sinners are right about what a gender is. Because I'm a sinner, who am I to speak out against what these other sinners say? About what's love? About what good discernment is? So we got to be careful. We got to hold tightly to that word. When we sin, we proclaim the blood over the law, but we don't let go of the law. We align ourselves back to it. And it's going to become even more powerful in these dark days, even more important for us to align ourselves to that law under the blood. I used to tell my students that even if you sin this second, the next second, confess and go back to the Lord. Leave no time for the enemy to gain a foothold. We are in war. The third one is the one I really want to focus on today. And maybe you know it's the rod of Aaron. The rod of Aaron was a dead stick. If you don't know the story, there was a man named Korah and some followers that said, well, why do you guys get to be the priests? We want to be in charge. And so God, in his infinite wisdom, said, everyone get some dead sticks, put it before my presence. Whichever one buds, that's my chosen leadership. So they put these dead sticks in front of the Lord's presence. They go to bed. They come out. Aaron's rod was the one that budded. But not just budded. I need to say it actually had almonds on it. It produced fruit overnight. Those are probably tasty almonds. But here's the thing. It produced fruit. It wasn't just pretty. And Aaron was the chosen leadership. And what this rod now represents, God said, put that into my footstool. That rod represents that his authority was chosen by resurrection, obviously fulfilled by Jesus, who resurrected, and therefore he is the king, right? He has dominion over death. Remember what we talked about? The king puts his foot on things he has dominion of. So he has dominion over our provision, dominion over the law, and dominion over our death itself and our resurrection. And that his chosen authority, first and foremost, is life. So when we talk about God being an authority and God's kingdom walking in that authority, let's talk about that in a second. It's always for life. And anything that's death is not of God's kingdom. I would be remiss on that statement to not read this from Jeremiah 19. For they have forsaken me and made this a place of foreign gods. They have burned sacrifices in it to gods that neither they nor their fathers nor the kings of Judah ever knew. And they have filled this place with the blood of the innocent. They have built the high places of Baal to burn their sons in the fire as offerings to Baal, something I did not command or mention, nor did it ever even enter my mind. This is God speaking through the prophet Jeremiah on the state of Jeremiah's day. The state of the nation was that they decided to follow, and God almost says it like it never even entered my mind to do something like this. To erect places in culture where we would kill innocent. I heard someone say, well, we've got one party, and again, I don't want to make it about politics, but our day is dark and we need to understand the day. We've got one party who is imperfect, but the other one is straight evil. And I'm sorry if you're a Christian and you're like, Kamala Harris and Democrats. But look at the platform. It's not about the people. They want to distract us with the people. Well, you don't want a woman? I don't care. Although the woman did take the fruit first. I'm just saying. And then the man also took the fruit, so don't get twisted, right? It wasn't the woman's fault. Man needs to take their dominion as well. But I will say this. Look at the platform. They're trying to not say enough words. In fact, I loved your illustration, Pastor, a couple weeks ago. One was, 16 pages, and the other one was 60-something pages? 90, right. The 16-page one, they want to say less words so they don't get caught with what they actually believe. They're hiding in the shadows, and that's where evil grows. But they can't fully hide it because then they say stupid stuff like, you're in the wrong rally. Anyways. I don't want to make it about party. I do want to make it about us being Protestants. I have a hard time aligning to God's word and voting for the Democrat Party right now. And I have the same hard time with the Republicans. I would actually call on President Trump and Vice President Vance to make it so where abortion is not legal at all. But I don't want to get into the debate. I know that there's other more nuanced things about that. My point here being this, that how can we conduct our lives being okay with policies, ideas, and actions that promote death when we were called to walk into authority of our King who has dominion over death, and his authority exists to promote life? Thank you. Satan also tempted Jesus, jump off of this high place. I'm sure the angels will catch you. It's funny how he's promoting death. Jesus says, I'm not even going to tempt the Lord. I rely on God, and I follow his word. I believe that as believers, we need to understand that this king's footstool, God, and the reason why they call it king's footstool is because the Ark of the Covenant was a box. It had a lid. On the lid, they would sprinkle the blood of the sacrifice, which would cover a multitude of sins and cover the law, so that when the king sitting on the cherubim, who were on top of the box, their wings touching, he would sit on their wings, his foot would be on the box. He'd look down at the law to judge, but the law was covered by the blood. Is this all ringing bells? I mean, the pattern you all know. A lot of you old saints are like, yeah, let's go. The blood's covering the law. And he says, oh, you're forgiven. I don't see the law. See you. So thank God for that pattern that he put into place before Jesus even stepped foot on the scene, right? And so he's sitting on this throne, his feet on the footstool, because what was inside the king's footstool in the ancient world also was what was important to him. And if he looked down and he saw that you were not aligning to the things that were important to him, his word, promotion of life in this instance, and belief in his provision, he could judge you. Now, again, we have the blood of Christ. Thank God for that. But we should be, as kingdom-minded people, going forth in that authority, taking what's in that footstool, harboring it in our hearts, and going out and making his kingdom come, his will be done on earth today. It's not enough for us to just sing holy, holy, holy. That is great. It is awesome. And I love that this church is a church that's committed to voting. It's committed to going and praying. It's committed to each other. That shows me that the fruit, like from Aaron's rod, is here in this congregation. But as the days get darker, we have to hold tightly, and I'm preaching this to me, I have to hold tightly to remember that when it comes time for me, like Esther, to speak at work about the resurrection of Jesus, about his authority on earth, about the truth in the confusion and the lies, that I am to say, if I die, I die. Like Esther did. Because at the end of the day, my company doesn't provide for me. The Lord provides for me. At the end of the day, and I love Hebrews, and I wanted to go through almost the entire book of Hebrews, but I spared you. You're welcome. If we look at Hebrews 11 says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the fruit of things not seen. And for me, when I read that, thinking about what are we hoping for, Paul later says in his letter that our cornerstone of our faith is the resurrection in Christ Jesus, period, end stop. Without it, our faith is nothing. We preach nothing. It doesn't matter. If Jesus did not rise from the dead, none of it matters. And that's true too, right? Because if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, we would see he's not the king over death. And also, he would die on a cross as a sinner for his own sins. That's the whole theological component there. But then it starts going through all these people in the Bible that lived this life of faith. And I honestly came back to this going, oh my gosh, I need to read this a few more times. Because I think sometimes I put faith is the substance of things hoped for on a coffee mug and put some little chocolates in it, and I'm happy as a Christian, right? But here's what it actually says. Going back to us being Protestants and looking at the people of God through history. First, it starts with Cain and Abel. Cain gave an offering of gratitude to God, and then he was killed for it. So, we have to have Cain's attitude with the understanding that you could get killed just for being thankful. Neat. Okay, let's keep going. Jumping down a little bit, it says, by faith Moses, where he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of the Pharaoh's daughter. Listen, I'm proud to be American, where at least I know I'm free, but I won't forget the land that's coming that God died to give to me. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God, rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. Man, my mind, I just remember the story as he went off into the wilderness and became a farmer, which I'm there. I told you already, I want to farm. I want to go and do some herd stuff, right? But, Seattle boy, herd stuff. Let's go. So, but what the Bible says here, what God says in his word is he chose to be mistreated along the people of God rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin. He could have stayed in Egypt, being the Pharaoh's daughter, eating grapes all day, pumping the lies of the Pharaoh and mistreating the people that were innocent. The people that actually saved his nation. He wouldn't have had a nation if not for God's people. That's the same for America, by the way. Patterns repeated over history. Without Christians, there would have been no America. And I fear for where America's headed without Christians. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell. By faith, the prostitute Rahab welcomed the spies. And she wasn't killed because of her obedience. So that's cool. So there's options here. I might die for being thankful. I might not die by welcoming spies. By faith, and what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised. Do we fall in that camp? When I stand before the Lord, I've always said, I want to hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. But will I hear, thank you for administering my justice. Thank you for bringing my kingdom come and my will be done on earth. Or will I hear, hey, be away from me, I never knew you. You were more concerned about your job paying for your bills. I'm preaching this to me, and I hope it encourages you. It says, by faith, women received back their dead, raised to life again, but others were tortured and refused to be released so they might gain a better resurrection. So when we talk about faith, it's the faith, the substance of faith. The substance of what's hoped for. The hope for is the resurrection. That no matter what comes our way in these dark times, no matter what comes our way in our jobs, no matter what comes our way, and we have to make a decision that could cost us our life, and that's life literal and life figurative, right? Our pleasantries, the spoils, the sin that we get to enjoy, right? It's not all sin, but you know what I'm saying. Back to Moses' thing. Will we grieve our life more than holding on to a resurrection and a life that God has for us? I'm so thankful, and I don't know what time it is because, okay, we got time. Good. I'm so thankful to be a part of this church because I believe truly I'm surrounded by people that even if they struggle with this, they struggle with it. I know for me, I struggle. I struggle with these feelings. I struggle with wondering if I'm complicit and compliant, or if now is the time I need to stand up and make a stand against whatever this week's evil is. I'm so glad to be a part of this church. As the days get darker, my wife asked me, what happens if they do it again? What happens if the election gets taken? And listen, I'm not going to debate you on what happened last time, okay? That's not the point here. Because things are already being put in place to try to do that. We have states literally outlawing immigrants being able to vote who aren't citizens. Why did they do that? That is a strategy. We are dumb to turn a blind eye to that. So what happens if evil prevails? I believe we hold tighter to the three things in the Mosaic Ark of the Covenant. We align ourselves even closer to God's law. No matter how many times we break it, it's covered by the blood. We go back to it every single moment. We make our decisions from it. I believe we stand and we say that church and state are not separate because I live in this state. There was a pastor, or there was a man, a Christian man, I think he's a pastor, in Tennessee, who just got sentenced 6 months in prison for peaceful protesting and worshiping outside of an abortion clinic in Tennessee. And I had to ask myself, he said this, and it was such a great, Christian thing, and I loved it, in the sense that he said, I can't wait for my new mission field. I'm going to praise the Lord and pray for everyone in the church, or in the prison, and I'm going to preach the gospel. I'm like, yes, let's go. That's so Pauline. I hope, if anything, I need to pray for this man. We all need to pray for this man, that the gates of the prison fly open, that guards get saved. The warden's like, hey, you're released. And this guy's like, no, closes the door and keeps on preaching, because that is Paul. Let's go. And that's what the world wants to see, by the way. When the world sees the church actually take the authority that God has given them, they say, hey, maybe there's something of truth here. Maybe there's something of substance here. Maybe there's something of good here. Maybe there is life here. And that's why we shine as a church, when we walk in the authority of what's under God's dominion. And if we don't, we become dim. And they go, well, there's a lot of churches, and there's a lot of religions, and there's a lot of... No. There's truth, and there's not truth. That's it. But I had to ask myself, so who's going to fill his shoes? Do we then go out to Tennessee and continue peaceful protesting? I'm not talking about rioting, but we're not evil dummies. We are talking about worshiping the Lord and ministering to people who are lost. Is there someone taking his shoes? Can they lock us all up? And as a dad of 3, I go, not me. Can't lock me up. I literally work with an advanced camp, is the organization that works with fatherless young men, trying to raise them in God's identity for them and raise a new generation of leaders. How horrible would it be for me to go and get locked up and leave my kids fatherless? Or what happens to my kids if I don't? And I don't set that example. And I don't sit down with them and say, listen, daddy's got to do this. This is wrong, and it's against the kingdom that we belong to. America? No. The higher kingdom. Are we going to let one guy, one pastor, one believer have the faith to lock him up and not stand with him in protest? It's wrong what they did. They used a law for the KKK, by the way, which is ironic because of abortion and its racist roots. But are we going to allow this to happen? Obviously, we can pray, and that's the first thing to do, always. We should be praying for our nation, praying for that man. But I have to ask myself, at what point, I ask myself almost every day this, at what point am I going to stand up and say enough's enough? At what point do I say lock me up too? Let's overrun your prisons. What happens if all the Christians go to prison? Thanks for the walls. Like, we're safe now, I guess. Like, they give you 3 meals a day. Like, I don't mean to make light of it, but there is a little bit of like, what happens if we go to prison? We get everybody saved? Like, and so for me, I'd like the worship team to come back up. I'd like to spend the remaining time we have today in worship, because each one of us has to ask the question, how tightly are we holding the things that God said were important to him? How much are we actually walking in the authority he's given us? I got to tell you, I was a pastor for 7 years, and I never fully understood the authority I was given, I would say. Because I would sometimes be like, okay, but in this situation, is it different than this situation? And this situation, is it different than this situation when it came to the things of the world? When it came to voting, I didn't vote when I was younger. I let sin take over our world. And I regret that every day. And, you know, the more I wrestle with my calling and what the Lord has called me to do as an individual, I get to this point where I need to really walk in the fullness of the authority that he's granted me. And when you go, well, what is that authority? Is it to heal the sick? Yes, it is. But it's more than that. It's to promote life in all ways. It's to align to God's word and preach it and teach it and show it. When people ask, well, is this right or wrong? I'm supposed to know. I cannot stay silent. I know that there's at least 10 things that are right. Well, you can't start with love the Lord thy God with all your heart, mind, and soul. I'm sorry, to not do so is folly. Like, we're starting there. And let me explain to you why. And if you can't explain that as a Christian, I challenge you, you need to. Young or old, if you cannot explain as a Christian why we must start with God and loving him and why his wisdom is best, I challenge you to do the work. It's very blatant, because when we don't start with God, we instantly start promoting death. Let me tell you about my God that promotes life, and life to the full. Let me talk to you about a God who promised resurrection. That even if things don't go the way I thought they were going to go, there's something better to come. But don't you like want to have a great life here? And don't you want to have a comforts that all life gives you? Yeah, of course I want those things. But those things are not my end. That is. He is. Holy, holy, holy are you, Lord. I'm with you the rest of my days. The tighter we hold on to these three things. What I love about the Ark of the Covenant, I mentioned that it was made out of wood and gold. And I mentioned that the gold was from Egypt. So, like, that was a very real, very present, I defeated your enemies right now deal, right? Like, I took over Egypt, don't go back to them. But Egypt was representative of the nations of today also. But the wood was representative of earth. That the entire earth is his dominion. That you've been given authority, we have been given authority, no matter where we are, to proclaim the three things that are in that footstool. across the entire earth. And that can look like missions and shoeboxes and all the good things we do, but it must also look like war. In Deuteronomy 20, it says that the laws of war for Israel was to first go and make peace. First go to the city and say, hey, I offer you mercy and peace. And if they accept it, then you would go ahead and peacefully take over. I like how it says, it doesn't say that you will peacefully just walk away and be like, cool, we're good? We're good, we're not going to fight. No, God says you're going to peacefully take it over because God's will is that we would have dominion. Whether you like the language or not, that's what it says. God's will in his kingdom is to have dominion in this earth in every single nation, in every single tribe. And then it says if they don't, that's when we rally. Now, obviously, in Christianity, Paul says we don't just war with flesh and blood. So I'm not calling us to riot and necessarily fight. Although, if it gets dark enough, be ready. You may have to. That's a reality. We saw that in Rome. But we first start with peace. We first start with prayer. We first go and extend. You know what it does say is go over and take over. What are we taking over with? God's law. The law of the kingdom comes in. Number one. That's the first thing we institute. Nations don't take over to other nations and go, your laws are cool. You go ahead and keep doing them. Nations take over nations and they say, all right, this is the new law. I'm the king. It's time to obey. Our God says, and by the way, you're going to struggle to obey, and I'm going to forgive you. He's the only king to do that. We take over places and we have dominion promoting life. We don't let people get away with promoting death. We stop it. And when they challenge us, we have a reason for it. We're trained up as warriors because the word, it was war words. We have the sword of the Spirit, the belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness. And as a young Christian, I didn't get it. I'm like, okay, we're dressing up. As an old Christian, I go, man, I'm going to tighten that belt of truth even tighter until I can't breathe because I need it so bad. And you realize, oh, the belt of truth was for action, not just for holding your pants up. The belt of truth was to be girded so that you could go. Girded so you could war. Girded so that you could speak. And so we are in a war. The days are getting dark. If this was my last time to ever preach, it's the first time in the last 7 years, I asked, Lord, what would you have to say? And I believe he said, hold tighter to the things I said were important and be the people of my kingdom. Now more than ever, make your decisions based on these three things. Life and my dominion over death, my law and my forgiveness even when you break it, and my provision because you can't trust anybody else's. I would like us to worship in response to God, and you ask yourself the question that I ask myself way more than I like to admit. Am I truly holding on to these artifacts? Do I truly live the values of my King? Let me pray for us. Father, thank you so much for who you are. Lord, thank you for your dominion, Father. Remind us that the whole earth is yours, and even when it wastes away, you have something even better for us. Remind us that it's your will be done, your kingdom come on earth right now as it is in heaven. We're not just waiting. And lead every single person here to the reality of what you've called them to. Not just as your son and daughter, but Lord, as a protester, as a warrior for your kingdom. Father, we will not let the days get dark without shining brighter. And we will fight for your truth, no matter how many times the lies gain a foothold. In Jesus' name, let's worship.
You are worthy of it all. You are worthy of it all. night and day, let incense arise. Day and night, night and day, let incense arise. Day and night, night and day, let incense arise. Day and night, night and day, let incense arise. Day and night, night and day, let incense arise. Day and night, night and day, let incense arise. Day and night, night and day, let incense arise. Day and night, night and day, you are worthy of it all. You are worthy of it all. For from you are all things, and to you are all things. You deserve the glory. You are worthy of it all. You are worthy of it all. For from you are all things, and to you are all things. You deserve the glory.
As we leave today, I want to leave with this encouragement from the author of Hebrews. Remember those earlier days after you had received the light, when you stood your ground in a great contest in the face of suffering. This is Hebrews 10. Sometimes you were publicly exposed to insult and persecution, and at other times you stood side by side with those who were so treated. You sympathized with those in prison and joyfully accept the confiscation of your property, because you knew that you yourselves had better and lasting possessions. So do not throw away your confidence. It will be richly rewarded. You need to persevere, so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what he has promised. For in just a little while, he who is coming will come, and we need to believe that he's coming, and will not delay. But my righteous one will live by faith, and if he shrinks back, I won't be pleased with him. But we are not those who shrink back and are destroyed, but we are those who believe and are saved. Faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. And this is what the ancients were commended for. May we join the ranks of those who live by faith, who did not shrink back in this age or the next. Lord, thank you again for your people. Bless them this day. Speak to their hearts. Speak to my heart, Lord, again. And as Pastor says, go get them, Tigers. I had to do it.
You're worthy of it all. For from you